Today's meditation is going to be led by Mark Scott. Thank you.
To be or not to be?
Oh my goodness.
That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them. To die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's a respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a fair bodkin? Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but at the dread of something after death? The undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er by the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pith and moment, with this regard, their currents turn awry and lose the name of action.
Oh boy, that was beautiful. Today's presenter is David Krest, and the topic is considering suicide. David Krest is a physician according to the ancient Greek definition of one who heals or exerts a healing influence. He grew up in the mountains of Colorado, studied Oriental medicine at the Kushi Institute, and practiced holistic medicine at his clinic, all of which influenced the way he looks at the healing aspects of living and dying. He spent many years living 24/7 as a primary caregiver in homes of people who wanted to end their suffering. At age 34, David wanted to end his own suffering and considered suicide. Today, he shares with us what he came to understand on this topic from his own transformative experience and as a caregiver with the dying. Please welcome David.
Thank you, Mark, wherever you are. Beautifully done. To be or not to be? This is the question. Be, to exist in actuality, to have life. To be or not to be is what led me to the point of considering suicide. Suicide, the act of taking one's own life, voluntarily and intentionally. This is my story. As a child living in the mountains of Colorado, I would climb into the arms of trees and sit quietly, hearing only the crackly voice of magpie. I would climb to the top and stand on her tender arms. Her tender pine-scented limbs. The wind swaying me to and fro. Its breath filling me with life, just enough. I look down. The sun-warmed boulders are waiting my return. The creek singing upward, and I hear its song. Below is my family. Indian paintbrush, bluebells, and wild raspberries. This is my world, my reality, my real world, where I was listened to. The other world made demands of me. It told me I was not thinking, and that I must think, and that I needed to think the right thoughts, and that they were wrong thoughts and wrong actions, that I must learn the rules of this world in order to fit in. I didn't fit in. I don't remember when I did not want out. As a young person, I felt somehow I lived in two worlds. But I didn't give it much thought. The one and only world I appreciated and enjoyed was timeless nature. The valley, forest, and creeks, and streams in the mountains of Colorado, my home. Leaving this world, I would enter where I could not read the language of its nature, where time was reality. This world increased its stranglehold as I aged. Its expectations became my expectations and continued to command me to grow up. Use your head, David. Face reality. In times I was drawn to despair. In times of despair, I was drawn into its hellish depths. And I questioned my sanity. In my 30s, my thoughts were overwhelmingly telling me and showing me I could not live like this. The things that kept me in this world all had names attached. Daughters, wife, home, car, friends, status. And attached to them were expectations which I could not meet, and yet pretended I could. The thoughts of not measuring up to life had been with me since childhood. My back, like my father's, would spasm and bring me to my knees, unable to stand. I would wake to find serpents hanging from the chandelier above my bed. The thoughts of not measuring up to life at age 34, I was standing in the driveway of our elegant home. I had in my hand a fine French knife, my favorite culinary tool, and walked to the side door of our three-car garage with the intention of taking my own life. I turned the knob, opened the door, and stepped inside. I turned around, pulled the door shut, and standing alone, the knife at my side. I felt as if my body was melting away. I lifted my hand and opened the door. I walked out of the garage only to take on another distraction. I bought another house in the upscale neighborhood of Pittsburgh, New York. An old house where an old man had lived and died, a fixer-upper, quarter acre with a creek running through it. I planned on immersing myself in its restoration and mine. The once beautiful flowered wallpaper was now faded and peeling. Its weathered windows filmed over with time. The whole house was gray, haunted. A few days into my work, I was standing upstairs looking down the long, dark hallway. I felt my body tense up. I was frozen with fear. Here I am again, in abysmal hell. I was being pulled into its center. I found myself descending the stairs. When my feet touched the landing, they took me onto the front glass-enclosed porch, where my 6-year-old twins, Paige and Kimberly, and wife, Joanne, awaited me. Avoiding their eyes, I looked through the broken pane of glass into the wild weeds in the front, outside, and declared, I'm leaving. I could no longer fake my existence. My life forces were depleted. I had to leave the physical world I was framed in. I could no longer be the actor who I was falsely identified with. I walked out, leaving everything, taking my name only. Sorting and cleaning organic produce at the Genesee Co-op got me involved in a more conscious way of living. After sleeping for weeks in the back of the store on a piece of cardboard and a World War II sleeping bag, I was grateful when an opportunity came for free housing at an inner city parish's empty house. Once there, I was seduced. Seduced by the freedom of the brown, wide-eyed children who self-entertained as I did as a boy child. To Together we gathered used and broken donated bicycle parts, together putting wheels under their feet. Their world was expanding, and so was mine. I had to come to life. The children lived in this present, which I had lost in the busyness of surviving. We were all benefiting on a soul level. One day, I was approached by a representative from a nearby group home who had heard about the bicycle project and offered me the job of managing 7 troubled teenage boys. Needless to say, living and caring for these young men who did not fit in provided me with the opportunity to accept and respect their vulnerability and my own. And to see the strength and courage that kept them alive. After 8 months, the Dake Street group home was sold to Catholic Services and I was out of a job. And ended up in Colorado. I was led back to the land. Nebula Farm Commune. Great being back to the land. Gardening, caring for the goats and chickens, making yogurt. I came to see that the commune was not the place for me. I had not come to hide out. Leaving the farm, I began a journey of introspection and silence. I realize now that my life had been a frantic running from silence. The silence I had only found in nature. I discovered I was still divided between 2 worlds. Following the sun's warmth, I wandered, hopped freight trains and walked and sat in desert, mountain, valley. After a time, surrendering, yielding to the pregnant moment. My body's mind became open and softened. This time in my life gave me the words for what I had experienced as an innocent boy. One day, simply sitting on the ground, feeling secure, I experienced for the first time the world as being safe. I felt such a sense of relief and knew in this moment that my daughters in their chaotic home life could feel this too. The heavy weight of sadness and guilt had lessened. As I continued to sit on the earth, I recalled a powerful vision I had as a 12-year-old, that our bodies are totally of this earth we live in. And through the earth's energy comes healing, both in thought and in form. And I heard my mother's words speaking to that boy, David, you will be a real doctor. At age 42, I received a degree in holistic medicine, opened a clinic in Denver, along with a call-in radio show. 1 year later, I realized I could not continue this form of doctor-patient because it supported the illusion that we were separate. For me, the model was confining and shallow. It didn't allow for the patient to be an active participant in the healing process. I took down my shingle, closed and locked the door to the clinic, and walked away. Toward my true calling, toward the real me. I began living full-time with those who wanted to end their suffering, and some who were close to death. I began with a dying cancer patient. My role, as I saw it, was to encourage and support him to clean up his life before dying, something that I feel so important. As our mutual trust and respect grew, Leo was able to move with grace toward his physical death, healed and content, mentally and physically. I began living in full-time, my next two live-ins, who had the new disease known as AIDS, which came with a guarantee of death and suffering. For me, this was a humbling reality. Recognizing my own vulnerability and lack of strength when challenged and confused. My learning was unfolding. I was grateful. I was then led to Phyllis, who welcomed me with her bloated body and crooked smile, warm heart, and open arms, because she was ready to get out of the dark, stinking basement room bed she had laid in for 5 years, ever since she had suffered a stroke. A deep mutual respect and intimacy grew between us as we created an environment designed to nurture a sense of well-being for healing. Hers was rapid. Honoring her eye for beauty and her taste for good food with the meals I prepared played an important part in her recovery. Phyllis gave me the sense of being a real physician. One who heals or exerts a healing influence. Along with the gift of paying my full tuition to the Kushi Institute of Oriental Medicine and a new Buick to make the trip. My studies gave me an intellectual understanding of nature's relationship to the healing of body, soul, mind. Living in and working with others who were struggling with their pain, suffering, and demons allowed me to see that my distorted, limited view of my life and my heady thinking were what brought me suffering and led me toward my considering physical suicide. Considering suicide, the act of taking one's own life, voluntarily, intentionally, has taken on an even deeper meaning since just this past week, my kid brother took his own life. His mental suffering was just too much for him. My reflection on his life and his suicide has certainly given me an opportunity to explore and examine even more deeply the cycles of life and death, and how suicide, a topic we avoid, fits into this cycle. Suicide as a way out can be considered cowardly, a weakness, immoral, or embarrassing to friends and family. And yet, many of us have experienced life as being just too much. Growing up in nature, I witnessed the cycle of life and death. Beginnings and endings. Life emerging and disintegrating. Where things come and go and come again. Left to nature, our physical bodies age, become diseased, and die. On the other hand, our thoughts, I'll have to say in the other world, our thoughts, which govern our emotions, may also become outdated, aged, and diseased. They can cling like lichen to a rock and may not die. In order for unhealthy thoughts to die, we humans must take the initiative for recognizing these thoughts for what they are, as not being life-giving. I have to continually die to my distorted, life-sapping thoughts in order to live fully. And I have to pay attention to what I'm feeling. In order to become aware of my feelings, I needed to allow myself to experience the sensations of my body. One would think that this wouldn't be a problem for someone who grew up using their body to climb trees and boulders. Yet, as a male, I was taught to be tough. Not cry, not to feel, not to show my emotion, and be in control. In other words, to ignore those signals that could give me insight into my discomfort, confusion, anger, my feelings of inadequacy, my suffering. I think to some extent this is true for most of us. Ignoring, repressing, stuffing the very ingredient that makes us human can become overwhelming, which may bring us to the point of committing suicide or through escaping through distractions, overeating, overdrugging, overmedicating, busyness, overworking. These distractions work only to bring us temporary relief, while we ignore the cause of our suffering, delaying our real work, only delaying our real work. At the time I considered suicide, my life had become overwhelming because I ignored my gut brain. The times I gave in to what was expected or wanted from others, or because I wanted to look good. Like the time I knew that marrying Joanne was not right for me or for her. Yet I pushed that feeling, knowing aside, and was pulled into doing what was right. Rumi understood the deep pain that comes with losing the union with ourselves. The deep pain that comes with losing the union with ourselves. Not only did I fill my life with distractions, but over and over I betrayed the very essence of who I am. This is the pain of what led me to consider suicide. And this is what led me to finally facing myself. This is when I started exploring and letting go of my distorted and toxic thinking, and letting go of being controlled by my ego's need to survive. Goethe says it for me. As long as you have not experienced this, to die, and so to grow, you are only a troubled guest on the dark earth. It's as simple as this. We must die to the illusion of our separateness in order to live. I want to live. I want to grow. I want to see. I want to know. I want to share what I can give. I want to be. I want to live. I want to live. I want to grow. I want to see. I want to know. I want to share what I can give. I want to live. For you, my brother.
Well, we can open it up to questions now. So for those of you who would like to ask a question of David, please raise your hand. Again, a mic will be brought to you, and if you would stand and hold it close to you. You're welcome to make a few comments, but mostly this is a question time. Time to see what else he knows that you're interested in or like to hear more about. Great.
Thank you very much. I'm very moved. I wanted to know what your relationship is with your children. Yeah.
My relationship with my children is full of wonder and joy and love and acceptance. Thank you for asking. And with my used-to-be wife, their mother.
Another question? Comment? Okay, lady in the middle here.
I'm wondering if you kept the French knife and if you used it to make meals for Phyllis.
I left everything behind, but I got another French knife.
David, thank you so much. Very moved. Question. As a 12-year-old, in that tree, what could have helped you? I'm sorry, I'm very moved by this. And I can relate it to my grandson. Who could have helped you to understand how to go forward in your life as David and not as the expectations being put on you that were uncomfortable and difficult? How could we have changed that moment? Or did you have to take that road and find your way forward by yourself?
Yes, thank you very much. And your last few words about taking the road by yourself. No one knows what's best for another. It's for us to discover on our own.
Just as a, I don't want to say curiosity because it makes it sound trite, but how many in the audience have been affected personally by suicide? Family members, people you know. How many have been affected by suicide in your lives? By family members, people you know? Quite a few. Quite a few. Is that it for today?
Thank you.
Okay, one more. Wait a minute.
I think I know
Stand
the
up, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think I already know the answer to the question, but I probably just want it reaffirmed.
Yeah.
Can someone be blamed for someone else's suicide?
Like I say, like you said, you know the answer, as everyone does. You know, there's the unconscious way of dealing with life. He did it to me, she did it to me, that did it to me, I did it to me. And then there's the conscious. I am.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Let me remind you of a few things, please. You can turn your cell phones back on. We hope you come join us for this interesting, fabulous conversation we're going to have next week. Please stack your chairs and pick up your coffee cup. Thank you for attending today. Take good care of yourselves for dinner today. This was a very touching subject. Check out our website.